probably going to be a discussion sheet most of the time. All right, so you haven't read anything yet. Maybe you read a little bit of the book, I don't know. I didn't assign anything, of course. But it's fitting, considering that we will be primarily going through this book this semester. It's fitting to take a look at the introduction. Well, actually, not the acknowledgments or preface or forward or anything like that. I want to take a look at the point of departure, which is page 1 of the book. And if you don't have the book with you, that's fine. Don't stress too much about anything right now. I just going to give you a bit of a taste of what to expect here for the rest of the semester. In the words of the author himself. Huston Smith, as you can see, is the name of the author of this book. This book was written some 50 to 60 years ago, and it's still considered one of the best comparative religion textbooks out there. It's naturally dated. You'll see as we go through it some things that were a little more relevant when they were written than now. But it's
although comparative religion.
It's less of a textbook than it's more of a I don't know. It's almost poetic at points. It's not a dry just relaying of a bunch of facts, which is why I chose to stick with this instead of change the book when I took over this course.
Oh, because they just talk about key points.
Yeah, he says as well there on page 2. He says this is not a textbook in the history of religions, and I already mentioned that a bit last class here. This, of course, is a philosophy class, not a history class, as I said, and history is important, extremely important for what we will be talking about, but we'll only say enough about the historical details in order to give context to the values and teachings and principles and ideas involved in each religion. This being a philosophy class, that's of course what we'll focus on, and fittingly is what this book focuses on. He says, being that this is not a textbook in the history of religions, this explains the scarcity of names, dates, and social influences, and what follows, and the page that follows, that is. He says there's plenty of other books that do that well, but he's doing something a bit new here. At least when he did it, that is. I want to fast forward here to the third point he makes there on page 4. He admits right off the bat, this book is not a balanced account of its subject. That's not something you always expect to see in the introduction to a textbook for a course, is it? This is not a balanced account. He's admitted that right off the bat. He says, I'm not just standing here trying to objectively describe everything I see. He's not going to lie to us either. I mean, he of course wants to be honest here. But B, there's a difference between being honest and feeling the need to go into great detail on all of the gross, nitty-gritty, unnecessary stuff.
That would be burdening.
He's not, yeah, we burden and he's not going to turn this into, there was this horrible show, I don't know if it still exists, I never watched it, when it did exist. Let's see, am I getting it? Jerry Springer? Has anyone ever heard of that? Does that still exist? It's still going? So it's this horrible show where they just like bring people on with horrible problems and they just basically have a great time laughing at and hearing about how horrible people's lives and situations are, and it just gets very ugly. He's not going to do that in this book here with religion, he says. He's well aware that not everything is sunshine and roses in the story of the various religions of the world. He says, continuing on after the first sentence of this book is not a balanced account of its subject, the warning is important. I wince to think of the shock if the reader were to close the chapter on Hinduism and step directly into the Hinduism described as a religion that enslaves you. He's not saying it is, by the way. He's just saying there are many accounts of things that are much darker than the account he's going to give here, and they're not entirely untrue. They are describing things that do indeed happen. He's just not focusing on that. It's Kali Temple in Calcutta, the curse of the caste system, 2 million cows revered to the point of nuisance, on and on and on and on. He's a big fan of it. He loves Hinduism. But he's saying that, for example, in Hinduism, a good example to take, because it's the first religion we'll cover here, he's not going to focus on all of the less flattering stuff that some more salacious publications might. There's something today called clickbait. Has anyone ever heard of clickbait? What's clickbait? you put forward the most horrendous sounding or ridiculous sounding or obscene sounding thing first in hopes that'll draw people into clicking on the headline or the thumbnail or whatever's on there online, drawing them in by appealing to their lower desires, appealing to their morose delectation. Morose delectation is the word for taking pleasure in the offense of somebody else, in the injustice of another. So he doesn't want us to come to any of that in this book. He's going to focus on what is most valuable in each of the world religions. And again, as I said last class, whatever your religion happens to be, or if you have none, you can still find incredible wisdom in all the religions we're going to go through here. He admits the full story of religion is not rose-colored. It is often crude. Wisdom and charity are intermittent. Intermittent meaning you don't always find everybody being wise and charitable in the individual history of religions. And the result is profoundly ambiguous. A fully balanced view of religion would include all of the human sacrifice and scapegoating, fanaticism and persecution, crusades and holy wars, witch hunts, so on and so forth. He knows that. He's not oblivious to reality. He's just saying we're not going to focus on all that stuff in this book. This is not it's not a Jerry Springer show. As I said, this is not appealing to our pointless interests in just seeing how messed up things can be. You can try and put across the wisdom in the religions as well, and as honestly as you can, focusing on what is good for the sake of our own edification, truly. Education, yes, but also edification. He's going to bring that up in a moment. There's also a word called rubbernecking. Anyone ever heard the word rubbernecking? What's that?
It's when people would watch car crashes.
Yeah, and it's a problem because more car crashes tend to happen because of people looking at car crashes on the road. Rubbernecking, in other words, people are looking behind them, driving. Look at that car accident! Boom, then you get another one. Anyway, that's the same base impulse here, he says, that he's not going to appeal to in this book. He's not going to present things just because we have this sick fascination with seeing all the gross stuff. He's going to focus on what is good, while not being oblivious to the fact that there's plenty of not good stuff involved. All right. This is a book about values, he says. Probably as much bad music as good music has been composed in the course of human history. But we do not expect courses in music appreciation to give it equal attention. Time is at a premium. We assume that they will attend to the best. I have adopted a similar strategy with respect to religion. He's of course going to cover all of the major world religions here, but when it comes to what to focus on in covering them, just like if you're going to take a music course, you're hoping that it's going to focus more on the quality music than the poor quality music. So too here, he's going to focus on the greatest wisdom he can find in all of them. The greatest values, the greatest teachings, the greatest aspects. Not all the dark, dirty stuff that inevitably is part of anything that's in human history. The empowering theological and metaphysical truths of the world's religions are, this book is prepared to argue, inspired. Institutions, religious institutions, emphatically included, are another story. In other words, he's admitting every religion out there has got many corrupt dimensions of its institutional structure. Anything in this world does. But he's willing to take religion as seriously as he possibly can. And to take religion as seriously as it can is to acknowledge the possibility that it's what does the word inspired mean in this context?
Inspired, people inspired to practice it, kind of.
Yeah, and that's the sense of the word inspired we tend to use in ordinary usage.
But why? What's Christianity all of us, the family, but somehow he changed his religion to Islam for some odd reason. So to be inspired to do something, when we use that word usually, we mean motivated to do something, and that's one use of the word inspired. And hopefully wisdom will be inspiring for all of us, wherever we happen to find it. But actually in this context, the author, when we speak about a religious text being inspired, that's actually a technical theological term for given by God.
actually divine. And he's saying, I'm willing to acknowledge, and he's saying he's willing to acknowledge that there are true elements of inspiration in these religions. And perhaps all of them he's even
At least open to. He's not all of these religions. This author is not going to be shy about admitting his own, but he's also willing to be open to inspiration, rays of truth in all of them. Okay. Moving along here.
This book takes religion seriously. This is what he says here on page 8.
It is not a tourist guide. There will be no pandering to curiosity seekers, no rifling through people's faiths to like what has shock value, no ascetics on beds of nails, or crucifixions among the penitents in Mexico, no Parsi towers of silence. I don't even know what the details of all these things are, by the way.
That expose the dead for the vulture's consumption, no erotic sculpture or excursions into tantric sex. The great religions have such material, sure, but to focus on it would be the crudest kind of vulgarization.
He's just expounding on what we talked about a few minutes ago. But this is the really profound point. He says there are subtler ways to belittle religion. One of these is to acknowledge its importance, but for other people. People of the past, people of other cultures, people whose ego strength needs bolstering. In other words,
Yeah, sure, it's important for weak fools out there who can't handle their own life. He says, I'm not going to belittle religion that way. I am going to take it seriously on its own right. Not in the sense that an adult takes a child's toy seriously, saying, yeah, sure, as a kid he needs it. No, seriously on its own right. He says, our parts of speech will be in the third person. In other words, he's always going to be speaking about they and in all religions, because by almost definition,
in any individual religion he's talking about, most people reading the chapter will not be of that religion. So he's always saying they, there's always third person, they, them, as to the adherents of the religion. Even though obviously many of us will be of one of the religions we go over.
that doesn't change the fact that he's going to always be referring to they and them. He says, however, despite that third person usage,
behind all these fronts is our deepest concern for ourselves. The chief reason now he's first person, now he's talking about himself. The chief reason I, Houston Smith that is, find myself returning to the world's great wisdom traditions is for help on issues that I have not myself been able to circumvent.
given the essential similarity in human nature, we are all more human than otherwise. I assume that the issues engage the readers of this book as well.
He's a scholar. He's a great scholar. He's actually a philosopher, Houston Smith. Even though he's most known for his comparative religion work. He says, why am I doing this? Why am I studying this? Why am I writing on this? Why am I teaching on this? Not primarily for its educational value. Not primarily for its scholarly value.
Certainly not, certainly not for money, but because I need help. Because I'm a human being who needs this wisdom in order to better live my own life,
which is difficult to do. And he needs the wisdom. He's saying he's studying this and teaching on this because he needs the wisdom that these religions present. Even the subtlest ways. He's getting deeper still with this coaching us before getting into the details of the religion. This coaching us of how he's not going to do it.
He's already talked about one subtle way of belittling religion that he won't do.
For, saying, oh, it's great for other people, weak people or people of the past who didn't have science maybe. No. But he's also saying even the subtlest ways to patronize religion will be avoided. Patronize meaning condescend. The way that honors it, not for itself, but for its yields, its contribution to art, or to peace of mind, or to group cohesion.
This is a book about religion that exists.
In William James's contrast, William James was a scholar who wrote on religion before Houston Smith here, I think several decades before. Not as a dull habit, but as an acute fever. It is about religion alive. And when religion jumps to life, it displays a startling quality. It takes over. All else, while not silenced,
becomes subdued and thrown into a supporting role. When one really dives into a religion, everything else, it doesn't squash the other things in one's life, unless one has become fanatical, which would not be good. but it does give them a new light, and it seems to make everything else secondary to religion fully alive, he's saying. Religion alive confronts the individual with the most momentous option life can present. It calls the soul to the highest adventure it can undertake, a proposed journey across jungles, peaks, and deserts of the human spirit. The call is to confront reality, to master the self. Those who dare to hear and follow that secret call soon learn the dangers and difficulties of its lonely journey. He now moves on to address science briefly, and this is coming from the last couple pages of his introduction here. He says, and this is a quote I've always remembered since I read this some years ago. He says, "Science makes major contributions to minor needs." And I can't argue with that. Now, I'll give my usual preface. I probably said this last class, but I just, because of things that will inevitably come up, I like to remind my students I'm a huge fan of science. I'm an engineer myself. That was my original profession, at least. I don't work as an engineer any longer, but I'm a big fan of science, big fan of engineering, big fan of technology. And yet I completely sympathize with him in saying science makes major contributions to minor needs. What on earth is that supposed to mean, though? What is he trying to say there? Major contributions to minor needs. What's a minor need? This is bold. I know he's being bold here.
A want and not a need.
A want, certainly, yeah. That would be one example of a minor need. Something so minor, it's more of a want, yeah. And all of the things that technology gives us. We always go over this in my philosophy classes, but a really quick preview, a really quick overview now. All the things that technology gives us, as important as they are, they're always means, never ends. We never want technology for its own sake. We want it because it gets us something else that we actually want for its own sake. You know, the most ubiquitous technology today, the phone, the smartphone, it does a number of things, admittedly, but it would probably be most accurately categorized as a communications device. And what use do you have for the best smartphone in the world? And whatever, I don't know what the iPhone is now. It's 11 or something, 12, I don't know. What use would you have for an iPhone 15 if you're already with the person you want to communicate with? No use at all. Be useless. I mean, you still have it, so you can ignore your friend completely and text other people. But that, of course, just speaks to the problem itself, that we have allowed means to contradict the ends that they're supposed to be subordinated to. Anyway, you could go through this with just about all technology. In fact, I dare say all. And realize that as important as it is, we always, all this technology and the science that bolsters it, we want for the sake of something else. And some people would say that scientific discoveries are their own reward. Maybe. That's a very noble take on science. And maybe for some people it is, but usually most of us probably want the technologies that science enables more than the science itself. Irrespective. What he's saying here is that, sure, these huge improvements can come through science and technology in communication and transportation and medical technology, but all those things just give us other things outside of themselves. Those are relatively minor needs. The need for transportation and communication. They can't give us meaning. They can't give us friendship. They can't, and it certainly can't give us any sort of assurance of what comes after. They are major contributions to minor needs. Religion strives to contribute to our major needs. And I'm not saying it always succeeds, of course not. Philosophy also strives. Religion and philosophy are often striving after the same thing with different methods. But they are striving after our major needs. Because you can have all your minor needs, your health, your money, your job, you can have all your minor needs satisfied fully and completely hate your life. And I should check my statistics.
Yeah.
You shouldn't hate your life. Please don't hate your life. But
I don't like that word.
the statistics. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, which you guys can. I don't mind being corrected.
If I recall correctly, last time I checked, there are far more suicides among rich people than poor people. That's what I read last. Having all your minor needs, money can only address minor needs. Having all your minor needs satisfied does not satisfy you. We need to address our major needs, which pertain to meaning, and things much deeper than money and science and technology can possibly answer. Religion is trying to do that.
What does satisfy?
Well, you'll have to stay tuned for the rest of the 16 weeks, I guess. We're going to be taking a stab at that through the lens of the various religions.
The person satisfying each other.
Well, that's actually where the Hinduism chapter is going to start. What are we really after? So focus on that when you do the reading for the quiz on Monday. I won't spoil the surprise for you, though. Okay, where were we here? All right, so science, blah, blah, blah. Skip a bit here so that I can make some headway in the discussion sheet, which we have made no headway in yet, sorry. He was some great mind. He mentions a lot of people by name, who I have no idea who they are, because they were well known in his day, but no longer are. Justice Holmes, I don't know who that is. He brings him up a couple times throughout this book, I think. He was asked who are the greatest benefactors of mankind itself. He was asked that, and he responded, Confucius, Lao Tzu, the Buddha, the prophets of Israel and Judah, Zoroaster, Jesus, Muhammad, and Socrates. This was some very highly regarded scholar. He didn't list any scientists or engineers in there. In fact, only one philosopher made the list, Socrates, and that's fair enough. The rest were of a religious nature, were people of a religious, in the religious context. His answer should not surprise us. This is Houston Smith now. Authentic religion is the clearest opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos enter human life. George Bernard Shaw concluded that religion is the only real motive force in the world. And he's not denying that people have deep motives who would not qualify themselves as religious, but perhaps you would qualify those motives themselves as quasi-religious. Alfred North Whitehead added science, however, which raises the number to 2. But it is religion as empowering that will be our object in the chapters ahead. He's going to focus on religion as empowering the human spirit in the chapters ahead, he says. Finally, this book makes a real effort to communicate. I think of it as a work of translation, one that tries not only to penetrate the worlds of the Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, but to throw bridges from those worlds to the reader's world. The study of religion can be as technical and academic as any, but I've tried not to lose sight of the relevance of this material that this material has for the problems that human beings face today. If you cannot, he's quoting someone here, if you cannot in the long run tell everyone what you have been doing, then what you are doing has been worthless. A great scientist wrote that. And I don't even want to bother checking the footnote here. I'll just take his word for it. Yeah, you can't just say, oh, I'm just so advanced, you wouldn't understand what I'm doing. You can never say that. You never have the right to say that. Because if what you're doing is too advanced for people to understand, it's useless. And it's not too advanced for people to understand, by the way. People who say that are just being arrogant. You need to be able to explain what you're doing in a way that an ordinary person would understand not only its worth, but its nature. What are you up to? That's what he's trying to do. He's not going to get lost in the esoteric details of the mystical text that any religion has that would be impossible for him to convey. He's going to make sure that he is phrasing these things in ways we can understand. In his last paragraph here, he says, a great anatomist, biologist of sorts. He used to close his opening lecture to beginning medical students with words that apply equally to our own undertaking. In this course, he would say, we shall be dealing with flesh and bones and cells and sinews, and there are going to be times when it's all going to seem terribly cold-blooded. But never forget, it's alive. That's how he ends his first. That's how he ends his first lecture.
Some days I feel alive.
Some days we do, some days we don't. So this biologist, and that's so fitting with biology, isn't it? You're sitting there studying these living things and like trying to figure out the details of them and how they work. And as a biologist, I would imagine, I am not one, I've never have been one. I would imagine you could, if you're not careful, kind of forget the fact that you're dealing with something alive here. You're dealing with a part of a person. And you must never forget that. As a doctor, even a nurse maybe, working with these parts of people, you forget that what you actually need to be dealing with is the person, because these things are parts of a living person. And he says that's the case here with religion. We're going to sometimes, no doubt, get lost on some tangents and some dry points that, yes, have to be discussed of a philosophical or theological nature to understand what we're talking about. But these are parts of something living. Religion is very alive. It is not something that's even capable of being understood from the dead perspective of dry academic pursuit. We're studying living things here, as crazy as that might sound. All right, so finally, meant to get through that a little quicker, but we still have some time left to scratch the surface of our first discussion sheet here.
Yay.
If anyone needs it, it's right on that desk by the door. Let me find my marker here. Actually, I need one to reference. All right, so our first table there, good reasons and bad reasons to study religion. So why study religion? Houston Smith has given us a good idea, but now let's get something down for our notes. We've got, your table makes it pretty clear for the sake of the chalkboard here. I'm just going to put plus, minus, good, bad reasons. A good reason, drawing especially from what he said there, would be to promote, or sorry, let me put that as my second point down. I'm already making it crossed out. Oh, I spilled coffee all over myself. I suppose I shouldn't hold this while I am erasing.
I use a mark to spell over.
I should do that, shouldn't I? Then I would miss my tankard. I do have one of those.
Would you like some baby wipes?
Oh, well, I think this did the trick. Thank you so much, though. Yeah, it didn't even stain. All right. So, as he was saying here, to grow from the wisdom contained within them. That's the best reason to study multiple religions, even if you're completely set in one and have no desire at all to consider changing. You can still grow from the wisdom in all. Grow from the wisdom within them. Okay. There's plenty of other reasons, though. There's, of course, so very much religious conflict today. And that is not good, obviously. We should not be fighting about this.
Well, I experienced something that's not nice.
Yeah,
Camp Bell.
yeah, it's,
I didn't expect this to happen. And someone was just abusing their religion, and it just went downfall, and I just didn't like it.
yeah, there's abusive people out there over religion, there's persecution, there's
I
fighting.
want a nice, kind of conversation.
Yeah.
If not, no.
So that doesn't happen often enough. So how can we try and remedy that? Well, by studying the various religions. By studying them, you will understand, you will come to realize just how much overlap there is, and you will be less inclined to fight about these things, to promote mutual understanding. Dialogue and peace. There is no getting around the fact that religion deals with the very core of ourselves, the deepest dimension of our being. There's two ways to try, so I can see now two ways to avoid fanaticism then. One would be to lie to yourself and say it's not as deep as it is, and pretend that the differences don't mean anything when they do. A better way would be simply to study what the various religions teach so you can see just how much wisdom and overlap there is. That would be the better way. And that's why we do it here. The promotion of mutual understanding, dialogue, and peace. So let's and let's not lose sight, however, of what may very well, and I'm not saying you have to have this as your reason for studying comparative religion, but it would be ridiculous not to acknowledge that it's a good reason to. What's maybe a big one we're missing here? To choose one. To choose one for yourself.
I already have one, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah, most people already have one, but I'm just, that's why I said this doesn't have to be your reason for it, but I'm just saying this is certainly a reason to study, a good reason to study
And it
religion.
makes my life a lot easier, too.
There you go. To choose one for yourself. Okay. When you're a kid, it's perfectly fine to say, I am blank religion, insert religion in here because that's what my parents are. That's fine for a child, but once you're an adult, you need to have your own reasons for doing what you do. And if you haven't,
I just stick with it, so it's fine.
if you haven't studied sufficiently to have your own reasons, then, that's kind of a problem. You're just kind of going with the flow and letting momentum do its work. And, we can't reinvent ourselves every morning. Obviously, there is something to be said with sticking with your momentum. But at some point, you need to step back and examine why you are what you are. So let's move on here. Let's talk about some bad reasons to study comparative religion. One would be, this is what we already brought up last class, to judge and condemn.
Oof.
To judge and condemn.
I don't want to judge or condemn.
So that would be a bad reason to study comparative religion. I'm not saying that you have to agree with all the teachings of all the religions. That would be absurd. You can't agree with them all because there are contradictions, and contradictions cannot both be true. But that doesn't mean we have to adopt a judgmental and condemnatory attitude towards them. We can approach them with a much more understanding approach. Another thing, and this is quoted somewhere in this book. I thought I was going to go over it in the introduction. I must have missed it. This is a Hindu proverb. And the Hindu proverb is this. You don't have to write this down, but I'll give you another thing to write down in a moment for it. You get more water by digging one 60-foot well than you get by digging 6 10-foot wells. What's that supposed to tell us? What's the moral of the story there?
Quality over quantity.
Certainly, quality over quantity, that's a good way of putting it. And what does that proverb caution against? Dabbling. Dabbling will do you no good. It's against the very nature of religion. As we said, it's an all-out thing. It takes all of you. It goes to your very core. You can't dabble in things like that. You got to go all out for one. And if you do dabble, you're not going to get very far in any of them. And that's what that Hindu proverb is getting after with water.
These words are just it's someone else that I just avoid.
Yeah, you would want to you would be kind of avoiding someone
I'm a very difficult
like
path
this.
right now. That's quite difficult.
Mm-hmm. The most popular approach to comparative religion today, honestly, I'm not a big fan of. I shouldn't say it's the most popular approach. It's a popular one. It's to pretend that there are no differences.
They are different.
There are many differences, and the differences matter. And as I said, contradictions can't both be true. We can acknowledge the differences and even argue for one over the other without adopting a judgmental or a condemnatory attitude.
Could we?
You often hear it said that there's religion is all many paths up the same mountain. Well, okay, let's just all get lobotomized and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Well, no, you can't do that. That's intellectually dishonest, it's morally dishonest, and there's no benefit in being dishonest. A lie is never, ever right, and it is a lie to say that there are no differences, that they're all just the same, that they're all just different ways of doing the same thing. The differences matter. We'll bring them up. We'll compare and contrast. It's certainly not my job to tell you which side to take when it comes to paths that diverge, but it is my job to acknowledge that these are diverging paths, and you cannot take them both because they are contradictory. So we're not going to pretend there's no differences. Also, this is something else to avoid: to judge it by standards below it. What is judged? The form or the mold? Goodness, I'm confusing myself here. Which do you judge the other by? The form or the thing molded by it?
Both.
You judge certainly you could judge both, but the form that you use is the superior standard, of course. If a given thing molded by it has some sort of a difference in it than the form itself contains, then you say that there is a problem in the individual thing molded. You do not throw away the form you used in that case. My point here is that when you appeal to just the cultural standards of the day that happen to be popular in 2020 Northeast US, that's not even a blip on the grand scheme of things. The last few decades of American society, that's not even a blip on the world, in our world history. That barely counts for anything. I mean, yes, it should be acknowledged. Of course, we can't pretend we don't live in the modern world and in this particular place and time. But you can't just go saying, oh, no, people don't think that way now. So I guess that's wrong. I guess we're right just because we happen to think that way today, and it happens to contradict like the unanimous consensus of all religions across countries and time. If you're going to compare the popular opinion of people in 2020 in the Northeast US to the unanimous consensus of all religions of all times and places, it's not a very difficult scale to figure out which one's heavier on. We can't go pretending that our little consensus here and there can just flippantly outweigh such a unanimous tenet of human tradition, which at the very minimum world religions are. So does this mean we have to blindly adopt these teachings? Of course not. We can and should be mentally awake here and consider each teaching, each value, each precept. But we can't, on the other hand, just suppose that we can cast them aside because they happen to diverge from modern sentiments in our particular time and place. That would be to judge a superior standard by an inferior one, which of course makes no sense. That would be like saying a local ordinance can contradict the Constitution of the United States of America. That's absurd. All right, so here's some good and some bad reasons to study religion. Let's look at the word itself. It's always good to look at etymology, I think, when you begin studying anything, because it can't tell you everything, but it can tell you a lot. Let me do a little racing here. You know what? No, let's not do that. We only have 4 minutes left. I can't start talking about etymology with 4 minutes. So we'll save that for next week. We'll polish this discussion sheet off on Monday, and then we'll take our quiz on the first half of the Hinduism chapter. If anyone's taking the quiz in the CAT, you can come to class first, and then when I hand out the quiz, you can go take it there. Let me just say it again. If anyone wants to get paid by Hudson Valley to take notes, please stay after and talk to me. And if you are a student who is getting notes taken for you, please also stay after and talk to me. Enjoy your weekend.